Good morning, everybody. In the back of the room, can you put your hand up if you can hear me okay? Or is it a bit quiet? Okay. So, as I was introduced, my name is Naheed Kurji. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance for Artificial Intelligence in Healthcare, the AAIH. And I'll talk a bit about the AAIH towards the end of my presentation. But in addition to the AAIH, and on behalf of a company that I co-founded back in 2013 called Cyclica, which was one of the founding companies of the AAIH, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the world of AI's application in drug discovery and more broadly AI in healthcare. Now, what I won't be talking about in detail today is the science behind AI or its application specifically in specific drug discovery programs. I think the seminar today, the conference today, as you'll look in the agenda, has some brilliant people. We just heard from Dr. Kim right now on some of the trends that are happening and specific examples in AI for drug discovery. I'm going to hear from another Canadian company, Variational AI, that later this afternoon, talking about specific applications in their world in AI for chemistry and drug design. What I wanted to do today was take a step back for those who are more new to the world of AI in healthcare and look at where we came from, where we are today, and kind of what I believe to be the important ingredients as we think about the future evolution of new technology, including AI, in the world of healthcare. Now, this presentation will last for about 15, 18 minutes. And so I want to engage the audience. There's a lot of you today. It's incredible for Q&A. So please, towards the end of the presentation, put up your hands and hopefully we can engage in a good conversation. Now, before moving on, I want to thank KPBMA and Chairman for the invitation, the Canadian government for reaching out and inviting me to come speak, and for all of you to listen through what I hope is an engaging conversation. Now, as we just heard, but if we take kind of zoom out a little bit, the question of where is AI having an impact is the question of the day kind of in 2024 and going forward. And when we look across the drug discovery and development kind of pipeline, you can see that AI is having a role kind of at all the critical steps. Now, it's not all equally having a role. In the very, very early days of AI in drug discovery, the terminology, a vast majority of the investment and the number of companies that emerged in this space happened to be in kind of the novel drug discovery and repurposing space. Now, for those of you who don't know me, there's a few in the room that do, I will say some controversial statements. I believe this space is the least exciting space of where AI is going to have a role going forward. I believe that the world of clinical development, understanding patient diversity and heterogeneity so that we can get into personalized medicine, the data around that, how do we access patients, the world of compute. We heard about NVIDIA making investments in Recursion, and that investment happened 6 weeks after Recursion acquired my company, Cyclica, back in May of 2023. So I got a front row seat as to see how these big compute companies are thinking about AI and drug discovery. But in addition to Recursion, NVIDIA has made investments in Terray Pharmaceuticals, in Iambic, and others that have not yet been disclosed. So I think this world is really exciting, but if I take a step back, it's kind of more downstream into, I'm really passionate about AI's application in predictive toxicology. I'm really excited about patient stratification and understanding patient heterogeneity so that the drugs that we are discovering that get into clinical trials are getting into the right clinical trials with the right patients. And then how do we improve the way in which physicians downstream working with patients have AI as an augmentative tool, whether it be in radiology, whether it be in surgery and robotics. I think there's so much exciting stuff now downstream from drug discovery, not to take away from its importance. Now, we hear a lot about AI and drug discovery today over the past 3 to 5 years. The first time I came to Korea for a conference was in 2019, where I delivered a similar but different presentation about kind of computational approaches in drug discovery. And as some of us know, but I think it's really important for all of us to know, is that computational approaches in the discovery of medicines have a very, very rich history. I don't know, this Fortune magazine and these individuals both worked at Merck in the US back in 1988, and this was published in 1989 at the front of Fortune magazine. And back then, computational drug discovery was supposed to be this panacea, this new way of drastically improving the success rates of drug discovery, reducing costs, increasing efficiencies. And the companies that emerged around that time that then became fully ingrained within the pharmaceutical industry, some of which are named here, Schrödinger, probably the most famous company. I think they have a market cap of $1.5 billion now, went public in January of 2021, if I'm not mistaken. OpenAI, based out of Boston, were acquired for $500 million back in 2023 by Cadence. Accelerus used to be called BioVia. They were acquired in 2014 for $450 million by Dassault System. And proudly, another Canadian company, Chemical Computing Group, still very active, much respect for these companies. These are companies that were founded in the early 90s, using virtual screening, molecular modeling, free energy perturbation to screen a library of molecules against a very well-characterized protein, understand its biophysical interactions, drill down into a likely putative molecule that they could advance into lead optimization and downstream. And they had impact. But what then happened in 2010, 13, 15 timeframe was this famous paper, I believe it's a famous paper, very important in my career, was titled How Big Data Can Revolutionize the Pharmaceutical Industry, written in April 2013. One of the authors, Sastry Chilukuri, is a mentor, sat on my board of directors for a long time. This opened up the investment world into what is now kind of AI for drug discovery. Back in 2013 and 14, it was not called AI and drug discovery. It was called big data and predictive analytics for pharmaceutical or for drug discovery. And the opportunity that was then presented, if you go all the way back to the panacea of the early 1990s, was, well, Aram's law continued to prevail, right? It still, the success rate of drug discovery and drug development continued to go down. But around the same time frame, we started to see compute power and Moore's law expanding. In this area here, I apologize, it was meant to be shaded in my presentation. This is the opportunity that many companies started to see. Can we bring big data? Can we bring compute, new algorithmic development to solve a problem that has been attempted to solve for decades? And as a result, some of the formative companies and what then became AI and drug discovery emerged. Now, these are not an exhaustive list. These are the companies that really were at the early conferences back in 2013 to 2017. Some companies like BioVista and Numerate were founded back in the 2010s. Cyclica was founded in 2013 timeframe. Recursion 6 months after Cyclica. We'll know companies like Exscientia, Atomwise, and Silico Medicine, very well-funded companies. These companies came at the drug discovery problem trying to solve the virtual screening problem that the companies from the 1990s solved, right? How can we screen a library of molecules against a biological target faster, cheaper, without having to do physics approaches? The only company that did not do that was Recursion. They were much more on understanding cellular biology. And that's why the acquisition between Recursion and Cyclica made sense. We were a chemistry first company. They were a biology first company. Now you fast forward to 2022, 2023 timeframe. This has definitely expanded, but you have thousands of companies around the world that are now applying or developing AI at a specific niche within the discovery of medicines. And then you have investors, you have big pharma companies have now started to build teams, groups within their own divisions to do this as well. And so I think this is a very exciting space, but it's important to then take a step back and understand, where is AI having a role within the discovery of medicines? And like I mentioned, I believe that the early companies were very much in the first screening, virtual screening approaches. We've now seen an expansion of AI technologies to understand the biological context of targets. We heard a lot about AlphaFold and the new structural biology approaches, understanding causal biology and systems biology through AI to put those targets into a biological context matters a lot. And then downstream, where I'm really interested is like candidate selection, ADME property prediction, solubility, permeability, hERG liability, does it pass the blood-brain barrier? All these important considerations to de-risk which medicine you're going to advance into a preclinical and clinical setting. So I think this has become quite ubiquitous. Everybody has a virtual screening approach or a new approach to chemistry. I think it's about the ensemble approach to do biology, new target identification, causal biology, systems biology, not just one target, but looking at pathways because polypharmacology is important, identifying a library of molecules that are then de-risked through unique data strategies. Now, it's not all going to be data first and AI first, though there is a big push by the FDA right now in the US to do a completely in silico IND package. They want to do that in the next 10 years. So is there a way to get out of physical testing of molecules in the preclinical environment so that we can get more through without compromising quality? And I think that's super interesting. Now, the question is AI having an impact, right? And the answer is, I think yes, but we're still very much in the early innings, right? This has only been 10 years, maybe, as a category within pharma. But we're seeing, quote unquote, the proof is in the pudding, and we're starting to see that it actually does exist. And what you're seeing here is the pipelines of the top 20 pharma companies back in 2023, October timeframe, as well as the growth in the number of discovery and preclinical, as well as some of the clinical phase assets for the AI drug discovery, AI native companies. I know this paper well. It was written by the Boston Consulting Group in the UK. I was one of the reviewers of the underlying data of this. It's not perfect because there's a lot of private information that they could not get access to. But I think the story is quite clear, is that in only a few years, right, 2013 timeframe, looking forward, we're seeing a massive wave. Now, can we continue with that momentum is the question. And I believe yes. But again, not with single individual technologies across the value chain, but an ensemble strategy. And as we heard from Professor Kim's presentation, and as you'll hear more and more, it's now starting to get recognized. Jeff Hinton, who is one of the godfathers, I don't like that term, of AI, but also at the Vector Institute at the University of Toronto, won the Nobel laureate in physics for his work back in the 80s in AI. And then you have the group from AlphaFold, from DeepMind, who came out with AlphaFold, not to take away from anything with David Baker, who just announced a new company this morning. But you have Damian John, who really revolutionized and did some incredible work identifying new biological protein targets using AI. And this is a company that did not have a strong bio background. They introduced their first system at CAS 19 or 18 back in 2018, 2019, an order of magnitude better predictive power. Then in 2021, again, another order of magnitude better predictive power. And I believe now of the 20,000 genes, 20,000 proteins in the human proteome, 1,500 were well characterized before. Now they've expanded that space to 18,000, 18,500, and pretty much all species protein structures are going to be well understood, if not now, in the coming few years. The question then becomes, which targets do you work on? Which targets have biological relevance? Which targets are those that have high enough affinity and structural understanding for the current technologies on chemistry to go prosecute? And so there's a really interesting challenge about, and Derek Lowe talks about this, the usability of all that information. And so there's a wave of innovation, and then there's a wave that needs to continue to be caught up. Now, I'll shift for a couple minutes on what I believe to be the future. We heard a little bit about AI technology as being really important. I actually believe the AI underlying architecture, unlike 10, 12 years ago, where all of us were developing new AI technologies, whether it be new convolutional neural nets, deep learning approaches, right? Types of technologies that are not talked about today because of large language models. I believe off-the-shelf applied AI is pretty much the day now. Like the next incremental wave of new AI is not going to have as material of a impact as it did 10, 12 years ago. But what certainly will is the quality of your data. Do you have sufficient compute? And in drug discovery and development, do you have access to the patients? I think this trifecta is super important. And when we think about data and patients, who has this? Hospitals have this. They work on patients who come into the emergency room, who go in for care, who get surgical care. They collect that data, and they live here. What hospitals, especially in Canada, don't do very, very well is then innovate around that or think about the model readiness of that data. They build it, they track it, but they don't really use it that well. Then you have data and compute. Companies like Tempest and Flatiron, Recursion, many others who are using data and AI and compute to make new predictions. But where does that data often come from? Is a good question. Compute and patients. I can't think of a company that is strong in compute that actually work on patients. If you can, by all means, but as I was thinking about this, NVIDIA does not have a hospital. Google doesn't have a hospital, maybe Fitbit and like wearable technologies, maybe, but not really. And so where do I see the biggest opportunity? Is at the intersection of this Venn diagram, data, compute, and patients. And another way of thinking about this is that you have healthcare providers and you have health tech companies. Healthcare providers depend on external health tech companies for new innovation, but they have that data, they have the patients. Health tech companies focus on technology innovation, but they depend on healthcare providers for data and patients. I just invested in a company called Cardiatech out of a spin out of Oxford University, and the chief technology officer and founder of Cardiatech is Namshi Khan. The first time I met Namshi Khan was in Seoul in 2019. He was speaking at this conference. I've now invested in his company and am advising his CEO and chief technology officer, who are a great team. And of course, they're in the cardiovascular space. But what they need as a health tech, pharma tech company is relationships with hospitals to get access to the data. By themselves, they don't have access to that data. And so I think it's really interesting to then think about, can you build a company that is a healthcare provider as well as a hyper innovative health tech company? And I've launched 2 companies, neither of which are publicly known yet. One just closed a $2.8 million round of financing this morning. The other is about to be oversubscribed on a $14.5 million round of financing. And this is where I'm building at this intersection. And I'm excited over the next few months and years to kind of continue to scale those out. Now, shifting, and I'll go through the Alliance for AI in Healthcare very quickly. The mission of the AIH when we founded it was to be the world's most collaborative organization of both academia, early stage hyper innovative tech bio companies, as well as multinational pharma and technology companies, to bring them together to identify common problems that we were all facing and develop solutions that we could then make publicly available to the market. Create, build, enable, and promote, all in an open context, pre-competitive environment. And the areas that we focus a lot on was responsible and ethical AI policies, and the Vector Institute at the University of Toronto, as well as Microsoft, have been very important in some of the publications from AAIH, talking about data standards, as well as how do we evaluate, test, and compare models. The community ranges from that entire group of early discovery all the way down to healthcare delivery. And I think we now have 55 members, most of which are North American based or European, but increasingly many more from Asia. I believe Standime joined the AIH as well. And so we're continuing to grow out our membership. And here's some of the members that you can see. And the areas that we focus a lot on: unified regulatory frameworks, data infrastructure, and privacy. Very, very important, especially as you think about working with hospital systems and de-identification of patient data, as well as policy development and advocacy. We work very closely with the FDA, Health Canada, and other regulatory agencies globally. And the things that we do, I think, really well are thought leadership. We have webinars, we have an annual member meeting. One of the webinars that I was most proud of was one that happened in December 2023. One of my former colleagues, Lena Nielsen from Recursion, as well as my very good friend, Paul Howard, who was at the FDA's, the commissioner's office at the FDA with Scott Gottlieb and Amy Abernathy, hosted a panel with, you can see these names, including the chief data officer of the FDA, talking about the trends that they're seeing related to kind of like digitizing the IND and what are the considerations from a regulatory perspective. We have a number of publications, all of which can be found on our website. And we host events all over the world: Toronto, London, Tokyo, Boston, New York, et cetera, et cetera. And we would love to find a way to penetrate the kind of South Korean community of AI drug discovery development companies to understand how we can all work together. So if you're interested in the AIH, please reach out afterwards. Okay, that's my presentation. Thank you.